Alright, well, welcome back to the second part of this mixing video tutorial. We're going to be going through and finishing off this tune, doing some fine-tuning stuff and kind of going over the last bits and pieces. I hope you learned a little bit so far. There's a few more things that we can go through here, and I'll sort of like just keep rambling about some shit as I sort of come along, sort of come across them, and keep you guys posted and informed about what I'm doing and the decisions that I'm making. We're about we're almost most of the way through. We're done with the drop pretty much. We're going to go on to the break instruments, the break drums, and start messing with the vocals as well. So those in themselves are pretty straightforward. The vocals, depending on what the vocal was like when I got it, depends on how much processing I'm going to need to do to it. So I'm going to chuck my headies on. I'm going to get stuck in to the rest of this tune. So this is what the drop is sounding like so far. So it's obviously missing some of the fills and stuff. The drums are sounding pretty good. At the moment, to me, I feel like the lead itself isn't as impactful as it could be. It's not as like present and doesn't have as much high end as I'd like and like all that kind of shit. So I'm going to see what we can do to kind of brighten that up. Because you can kind of see when we go into the cue, it's really missing like a lot of this area here. So I'm trying to think maybe if we can like separate it up a little bit and maybe add some harmonics to just the high end. We'll do nectar, and we should be able to not nectar. Let me just redo that. It's neutron. And what we can do is actually add an exciter pretty much. And we're just going to kind of add it in this top end here. So you see the before and after, we just added that little bit of harmonic in the top end there, so it kind of brings it out a little bit more. I'll do a on and off test for you. This will be off. Back on now. So it just kind of brings it out a little bit, because what I want to avoid doing is just bringing up the volume of that stem and just like overblowing the problems that we already have. So it's not like the whole thing needed to be louder. It's like just like that I was missing that bit of high end. So we just want to focus on bringing up that high end. We don't want to just compress the entire thing or just push the whole thing up in volume, because we're not going to get the desired effect. We're going to get more high end, but we're also going to get a shit ton more of the mids and stuff that we already are like, we have plenty of. We don't need to add any more of those in. We almost need to take some of those bits out because there are some like really sort of sharp resonances that are kind of pushing through. And this is what this soothe is kind of helping me tame, I suppose, is just these. What we can also do is add in a multi-band compressor as well to like sort of tame these a little bit more if we want to. So cool. So let me just group this and I'll turn this on and off just so you can see what's happening here. So off. And we'll turn this back on and we'll just see whether or not this is actually making a good or a bad change. So you can really hear that like resonating frequency that's in that kind of like 1K area. It'll be this bad boy here where that big drop is, where the big dip. When I turn all of it off, you can kind of really hear it smashing through and it's quite kind of like, yeah, in your face. Especially when we turn this back on, you'll be able to kind of hear the difference. So that's sounding pretty good to me. We can probably move on from there for now and readdress that if we need to a bit later. So it's all sounding good. We are missing anything down here. We've got the sub on, we got those on. Vocals, we can look at that in the breakdown any moment now. We've also got some extra fills here that we need to like look after, I believe. Okay, that's breakdown stuff. All right, we'll address that as well because we're missing something in this section. But I believe it's something from the break instruments, so that's all right. It's the guitar part. So basically what we're gonna do is work backwards now from the drop. We can start with the build, or what I like to do is also have a play with the vocal and kind of make sure it's what I'm aiming for is to have the vocal and the lead of the drop to be pretty similar in like amplitude and like perception. So we can start from here. Usually I'll go from like the build up and start bringing things in, or we can go from the verse. You can kind of go from wherever you want, really. I think I'm feeling the verse this time. Let's bring this up. So we go vocals to 0, bring all the internal stems down. What I'm going to do is reorganize this so the lead's at the top there. I've got some backings as well, which we'll pull up. Again, I like to put these in order of importance just so I can like have a vague idea of what the hell's going on. So it looks like the lead itself is already quite processed and compressed, and like I'm not gonna have to do a whole lot to that. So that should be good. And we'll see in terms of like EQing and stuff, but we'll have a listen. So one thing we can do is just have a look at. So one way we can sort of like feel it is by having the vocal play over have the music play with the vocal going into the drop.
So tell me how to live without you.
And what I sort of look for is just to see whether or not the vocal feels like too soft going into the drop and then the lead like, you know, takes over too much, or if it's the other way around, if the drop has less impact because the vocal's too loud. Just trying to find that like kind of sweet spot. So for example, if I had this down to say -10. It's obviously quite low and we don't really want it there. Whereas if I have it too loud, say quite like +6.
So tell me how to live without you.
See how the drop just like kind of loses its impact because it's not quite on par with the lead.
So tell me how to live without you.
So that's sounding pretty good. There are a few things EQ wise that I wouldn't mind having a look at with this. It sounds quite thin.
All I can remember is a
So if you have a look at the, I mean, you can kind of tell, but I'll let you know anyway. You can sort of tell just by listening that the vocal is quite like thin and is lacking a bit of like chest, a little bit of like body kind of thing. And if I play this and you can look at the spectrum, you got to see that the curve, it kind of goes like up when really it should have like, it should be pretty level. The 100, 200 area should be pretty full. The 400 to 2K sort of area, that mid range should be like pretty full as well and bouncing around with his voice. And then the high end should be sitting around the sort of level as well. But
Backing out the weekend with something that will get me there.
You can see that like down here really doesn't exist.
Backing out the weekend with something that will get me there. Backing out the weekend with something that will get me there. Backing out the weekend with something that will get me there. Backing out the weekend with something that will get me there.
Another thing to do is have if you want to like try and help it a little bit is Nectar has, it's by Isotope Nectar. It's like a vocal processing unit. Is we can have a look at the vocal assistant and go assist, and maybe I'm just going to go with modern and we're going to go with moderate because I don't want it too aggressive. Like maybe we'll do light because it's going to affect the intensity of the compressor and it's already really compressed. So I don't need it to be more compressed. Well, what this is going to do is it's kind of going to show us what is missing mainly in the EQ area and see like, it doesn't need any processing more. So like in terms of like compression or de-essing or anything like that, it sounds like it's all right. But we'll just like, I just want to see what it thinks that the EQ needs.
Backing out the weekend with something that will get me there. Oh, 'cause these days are reminding me the nights that you stayed and the promises we said we wouldn't break that kept us safe from feeling so alone. 'Cause all I can remember is about it in the deep end, trying to make my way to you. Blacking out the weekend with something that will get me there. Oh.
All right, let's see what it says. This is like the EQ one's usually a corrective EQ. It usually notches down some of the resonances. Then it has an de-esser, which is always handy. And then the EQ2.
Backing out the weekend with something that.
All right, so I kind of disagree like crazy with this.
Backing out the weekend with something that will get me there.
And it's trying to compress the shit out of it still, which we don't really need. All right, so this wasn't really that helpful, but it's always good to try and like have a play with things and see what it thinks. I'm just gonna go ahead and like.
Backing out the weekend with something that will get me there. Oh, 'cause these days are reminding me the nights that you stayed and the promises we said we wouldn't break that kept us safe from feeling so alone. 'Cause all I can remember is about it in the deep end, trying to make my way to you. Blacking out the weekend with something that will get me there. Oh, 'cause these days are reminding me the nights that you stayed and the promises we said we wouldn't break that kept us safe from feeling so alone. 'Cause all I can remember is about it in the deep end, trying to make my way to you.
If you watch the vocal processing video, you'll know that like I mentioned how important the sort of chest area, that low mid area is in making things feel present. So if I'm back here, I don't know if you're able to do it and like hear it after I process this, but if I'm up really close to the mic, it's called a proximity effect. And basically what happens is I feel like I'm really, really close to you generally. And a lot of it's to do with because you can hear the low end and the chestiness of my voice. Whereas if I'm back here, you'll hear a stark difference that there's not as much low end and not as much like beef. And it's feelings like it's a lot further away. And that's like legitimately what's happening. So the same sort of thing with this. If you want a vocal to feel like you want a vocal to feel present and up front, a lot of that is got to do with how the presence and chestiness of a vocal is.
Promises we said we wouldn't break, the kept the same. Promises to fall and I miss your touch. I can move it all, it hurts too much 'cause we.
So we've got these two left and right vocals, the backings. We're going to spread those left and right pretty heavily.
Promises to fall and I miss your touch. I can move it all, it hurts too much 'cause we turned to dust, gave up.
When the music's all in, I'm going to play with these a little bit more and sort of like level them a bit better because we want to hear them, but we don't want them to be like super up front. But again, this is pretty subjective. You can kind of like do whatever the hell you want here with the backing vocals, depending on how it feels. A lot of it's just like a feeling thing, and a lot of it changes depending on who the client is. Like if I'm mixing for someone, they'll often have a different idea to how I would like these things to be, like ad libs where they want to sit, how like far away they are, if they're on the left or the right, if they're super processed, if there's like a radio sort of effect on them.
Out the weekend with something that will get me through. Oh, 'cause these days are reminding me.
So here as well, this is something interesting that you might run into, like whether or not you have vocal just like effects sends, or like, so with this one, I've got the delay and the reverb as like two separate like actual audio tracks, so I can like level them that way, which is kind of nice. But it's always something to keep in mind as well. But we in EDM tend to over exaggerate effects quite a lot, especially in melodic music. We'll have a shitload of verb and a lot of like cool delays and stuff like that. So again, this is quite stylistic depending on how you want to go about it. But I'm aiming to be able to hear this, but not too much. So like you want to like have it. So easy way to set this, one rule of thumb, I guess, is when you're playing, pull it up until you can really hear it, and then pull it back down like another 3 dB. So it's like sits underneath it. You know what I mean?
I reminded me the nights that you stayed and the promises we said.
This delay has got a side chain on it, which is cool. So it's like when he's singing, the delay is sitting underneath him, and then when he goes away, the delay comes forward, which is really cool. So that's something to keep in mind when we're leveling this.
I reminded me the nights that you stayed and the promises we said we wouldn't break, that kept us safe from feeling so alone.
So basically, like the whole point of the, push it forward until you can hear it and then bring it back and make it sit underneath him is basically because you want it to be like a bed underneath the vocal. You want it to be like a room, a space for it to sit in. You don't want it to be a bright point of interest in this whole thing. You want it to be like to create a surrounding. And if you take it away, so like it's pretty much like a subtle thing. It's one of those things where you're not going to be able to hear it until it's gone. And like this is very much one of those kind of elements. So say for example, if I'm to use this now.
Give me deja vu.
So it's sitting nicely. It's not too upfront, but again, when the music comes back in, sometimes we're gonna have to push that up a little bit more to make it sit a little bit better, but we'll see, because I like hearing a bit of reverb. But let's go into the break instruments now that the vocals sort of sitting nicely. We'll start playing with this guitar. So we're gonna go back to 0 and pull everything down.
In the deep end, trying to make my.
Again, I like getting it to a level and then going minus, putting it on a nice rounded number, and then I'll use my arrows to go up and down to like get this set. So I'm not looking at it necessarily, I'm kind of feeling it.
In the deep end, trying to make my way to you. Blacking out the weekend with something that will get me through. Oh, 'cause these days are reminding me the nights that you stayed, and the promises we said we wouldn't break.
That feels nice there.
To save from feeling so.
What I'm going to do is pull this node down a little bit. I could definitely hear that that was kind of quite overpowering when I was like leveling it. So this might give us a clearer idea.
Drowning in the deep end, trying to make my way to you. Blacking out the weekend with something that will get me through. Oh, 'cause these days.
So just put an OTT on it to like kind of level out a little bit more.
Drowning in
The top end's not getting a lot. It's just like just hugging that mid and also that low, which is.
Drowning in the deep end, trying to make my way to you.
And I've just only got it on like 30%. I'm not wanting to do a whole lot. So I kind of like where that's sitting at the moment. Let's see what this layer is.
Drowning in the deep end, trying to make my way to you.
Cool. So I don't want this to be like louder than when it comes in here necessarily. I don't want that change of dynamic to be too heavy.
Drowning in the deep end.
I think that sounds all right. Let's have a listen to his reference and see where he wanted it to sit.
Drowning in the deep end, trying to make my way to you. Blacking out the weekend with something that will.
Interesting. It sounds like his vocal is sounding way better in the in his demo. So maybe the stem, something happened with the stem.
Trying to make my way to you.
Interesting. Okay, we'll play with that
I
still.
can move it all, it hurts. Tell me how to live without you. Alone. 'Cause all I can remember is the drowning in the deep end.
Okay, let's keep going on with this anyways.
I reminded me the nights that you stayed, as we said we wouldn't break the kept us.
Let's get these drums going. So we're going to pull these down. Start off with the kick like usual. I'm going to put that at the top there. Find that clap. Pull that up the top there as well.
Drowning in the deep end, trying to make my way to you. Blacking out the weekend with something that will get me through. Oh, 'cause these days are reminding me the nights that you stayed, and the promises we said we wouldn't break that kept us safe from feeling so alone. Deep end, trying to make my way to you. Blacking out the weekend with something that will get me through. Oh, 'cause these days are reminding me the nights that you stayed, and the promises we said we wouldn't break that kept us safe from feeling so alone. 'Cause all I. Drowning in the deep end, trying to make my way to you. All I can remember is the best of us, the love our days. I reminded me the nights that you, and the promises we said we wouldn't break that kept days. I reminded me the nights that you stayed, and the promises we said we wouldn't break that kept us safe from feeling so alone. Drowning in the deep end, trying to make my way to you. Blacking out the weekend with something that will get.
So what I might do is also, I'm going to make a bit of a side chain, very, very slight side chain, I think. I'm going to put this at the top as the ghost kick. Ghost kick. And then we're going to put this there. And what I'm going to do is just cut it down so it's just a transient. Way you do that is have it on beats mode, put it on transient, have it like with that little forward facing, right facing arrow all the way down to 0. So if we slow this. Cool, so it's just just want it to be those transients, so I'm going to make sure that there's no little double tap with that kick there. And the reason why I want just this just the transient is because I don't want the compressor that's going to be doing the side chaining to be reacting on the entire kick. I just want it to be on the transients, so it's like snappy and quick, and I can then have total control over the release time. So what we can do is grab a compressor. I usually call this SC1. I don't know why I call it GK. And then the sidechain audio input from at the very top here, it'll be SC1. Just out of screen for you guys, sorry. And then I'm going to turn this off, solo this. I tap it around 9:10 to 1 ratio, release at 1 millisecond, attack at 1 milliseconds fine, release at 30 is probably going to be about 40, and then we're going to duplicate that.
Blacking out the weekend with something that will get me through.
It's really subtle. I don't want it to be too crazy. I do want these snaps to be a little bit more present. Let's go -6.
Drowning in the deep end.
Let's go -10.
Drowning in the deep end.
Let's go -13.
Drowning in the deep end, trying to make my way to you. Blacking out the weekend with something that will get me through. Oh, oh, oh. Drowning in the deep end, trying to make my way to you.
Another cool thing we do is add this on every second one.
My way to you, my way to you, my way to you. Blacking out the weekend with something that will get me through. Oh, 'cause these days are reminding me that I said you stay, and the promises we said.
Again, same thing with this. I think you could probably do with a more noticeable snare. Oh shit. Just gonna go with that one for now. I'm going to cut that, and I'm going to unwarp it. Pull that down to -10.
I reminded me that I said you stay, and the promises we said we wouldn't break. The kept us safe from feeling so alone. 'Cause all I can remember is the best of us.
Cool, so it feels a little bit more snappy to me. Like I kind of want it to be a little bit more present. This is me personally. The client might not, but this is where we kind of like have that conversation and figure out what we want from each other there.
The promises we said we wouldn't break. The kept us safe from feeling so alone.
Cool, cool. So there's that. Again, we can do something and make it a little bit more exciting by having like a secondary. I'm gonna go with a clap. Just gonna put that on every second one. Again, I'm gonna unwarp it. I'm gonna like fire it so it's in the middle there. Don't need that much of a delay. So I just want this again on every second one.
I reminded me that I said you stay, and the promises we said we wouldn't break that kept us safe from feeling so alone. 'Cause
Cool. So that's sounding pretty good to me. Then we get on to the chorus section.
best of us, the love I love.
So let's have a look at what ones we haven't brought in yet. So we've got the drone atmosphere here.
Polaroids and memories of festivals that give me deja vu. Oh, when the best of us, the love. Polaroids and memories of festivals that give me deja vu.
I'm gonna pull that race in. I'm gonna go to -10.
Best of us, the love I lost to you. Polaroids and memories of festivals that give me deja vu.
So this is interesting as well in terms of like the writing. These chords don't sound like they're not the same or they don't fit in the same way as they could.
Best of us, the love I lost to you. Polaroids and memories of festivals that give me deja vu.
Yeah, so I don't think that that's necessarily the right progression because it doesn't really follow the vocal or the guitar that well. It does to a degree, but I think it could be better for sure.
Best of us, the love I.
So again, I'm just trying to bring out the high end a little bit on these.
Deja vu. Oh, when the best of us, the love I lost to. Best of us, the love I lost to you. Polaroids and memories of festivals that give me deja vu.
So one thing to look out for, remember how we played with the sub and it was, sitting around that -6 area on the drop. What we want to make sure is if we do have a sub in the breakdown that we don't want it overpowering that either. So we have like a really good sort of visual cue as to whether or not our sub's too loud in the breakdowns in comparison or in correlation to our drops. So this, for example, is sitting in a pretty nice area, but we can also gives me a bit, before it was probably a little bit too low. And when I pulled it up really far, you could see it popping up on that low end here.
Best of us, the love I lost to you.
So that to me feels a little too loud, but
Best of us, the love I lost. Best of us, the love I lost to you.
I feel like that's sitting in a really good spot now.
Polaroids and memories of festivals.
All right, let's play going into it.
Safe from feeling so alone. 'Cause all I can remember is the best of us, the love I lost to you. Polaroids and memories of festivals that give me deja vu. Oh, when the summer turns to fall and I miss your touch.
Cool. That's sounding pretty good to me. Let's go and bring this up. These are kind of like, you can put these wherever the hell you want, really. It's funny with the, I don't know where I tend to like, there's no typical spot where I really like them to sit like too high or too loud. Like sometimes they sound really good when they're just like, you can just hear them and they're just like in the background. Sometimes they're good when they're like really up front and you kind of want more energy from it. Cool. I also have this, I've just brought up those other little bits and pieces to accommodate and sort of support the other elements. So you got this like crowd noise, big clap thing, another big clap here, orchestral. So what we have to be careful of here is also not to overpower, like, because now that we're bringing in all these elements, we can't, it's really easy to like accidentally do too much and like add in too many of these sounds or like make them too loud. And then when they go into the drop all of a sudden loses impact because it's not as like noisy and like really, especially with these lower instruments that have that like low mid sort of like roominess, they can overpower, they can feel really strong. And then all of a sudden when you get into the drop doesn't necessarily have that kind of like low mid roomy sound because we like usually have all the sub and like a lot of mids and highs. So we got to be really careful about like not to overdo that. Let's have listen to his. Okay, so maybe his kick was a little louder. Again, we can maybe OCT this a little bit, slightly. And what that's doing is giving me a little bit more high end. When the summer tends to fall and I miss your touch, I can move it all, it hurts too much, 'cause we turn to dust, gave up on something true, so tell me how to live without you. Cool. Let's go ahead and cut that, pull that down here. Summer tends to fall and I miss your touch, I can move it all, it hurts too much, 'cause we turn to dust, gave up on something true, so tell me how to live without you. So tell me how to live without you. Without you. Without you. Okay. One thing also to look out for is like over the drop compared to like the build into the drop is a really crucial sort of part of the song that we need to make sure we like kind of nail in terms of like EQing and dynamic and like contrast and like all that kind of shit. One thing we need to be careful of is like, you know, you can't have too much high end in the build up and then compared to the drop. Like if we have a bunch of elements here that are like all crashy and high and stuff and the drop doesn't have those and it kind of loses its energy, that's something to keep an eye out for. So This I think is fine, but that's something to definitely keep in mind if you're like, why is the drop not hit as hard? Look at what your build is doing and see whether or not it's got more elements of excitement that kind of take away from the drop. So you can either pull them down or like filter them out as they get toward the drop potentially. And that's always kind of like a good way to do this. This is one thing I'm going to do here with these elements is I'm going to put on my little build reverb space rack, and basically it's just gonna like filter out a bunch of like the low end, and also gives me like control over the gain here, so I can go like this. I'm sure you guys have something similar. Cool. So I like how this is working at the moment. One thing that I'm noticing in the drop is that this snare definitely needs more high end. It feels quite like filtered at the moment. And I maybe want to bring up some of these, maybe add in my own or something like that. Hats, basically. Here's some other effects we can add in there. This is pretty intense, but like, let's just see. Nah. Maybe something a little bit more crashy. All right, let me see what his is doing on this little section here. I want to make sure we're not missing anything. Maybe I'm missing some vocal stuff. Here we go. We haven't quite gone through all the vocals yet. Just gonna send this through the master because I don't want it being sent through the sidechain. Without you. Okay, let me see what it sounds like on it. Sure, the effects and stuff are there as well. They all seem to be working. So maybe we can pull this up a little bit even. Okay, so it sounded a little bit weird there.
Tell me how to live with. Tell me how to live with. It whispers. Tell me how to live. It whispers when.
It's kind of awkward the way that finishes, so I'm thinking.
Tell me how to live. It whispers when the wind blows. I hear it calling out.
I'm gonna try this anyway and see and give it the whole phrasing.
So tell me how to live without. It whispers when the wind blows. I hear
Yeah, I think that's better without, and then it goes in.
live without. It whispers when the wind.
Yeah, that makes way more sense. That weird cutoff was a little bit too abrupt. Let's see if we're missing anything else here.
It whispers when the wind blows. I'm a testify. Something that will get me through. Oh, 'cause these days are reminding me that I said you stay. And the promises we said we wouldn't break, that kept us safe from feeling so alone. 'Cause all I can remember is the best of us, the love I lost to you. Polaroids and memories of festivals that give me deja vu. Oh, when the summer tends to fall and I miss your touch, I can move it all, it hurts too much 'cause we turned to dust, gave up on something. Oh, when the summer tends to fall, summer tends to fall and I miss your touch, move it all, it hurts too much 'cause we turned to dust, gave up on something true. Best of us, the love I lost to you. Summer tends to fall and I miss your touch, I can move it all, it hurts too much 'cause we turned to dust, gave up on something true.
Yeah, so this isn't following the same as the guitar. Like the bass and the doo 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 doo. Like it's not following the same as that. So that we need to address that. But that's more of a writing issue. So let's go over here again and check if these are the same, so we can duplicate these over to the breakdown.
Whispers when the wind blows, I hear it calling out your name. And even when I'm indoors, I can feel it all the same. 'Cause these days are reminding me that I said you stayed. And the memories we said we wouldn't break, that kept us safe from feeling so alone. 'Cause all I can remember is the best of us, the love I lost to you. Polaroids and memories of festivals that give me deja vu. When the summer tends to fall and I miss your touch, I can move it all, it hurts too much 'cause we turned to dust, gave up on something.
I need to turn this off. Sorry.
I can move it all, it hurts too much 'cause we turned to dust, gave up on
Let's see what these are. The ad libs we're missing.
name. And even when I'm indoors, I can feel it all the same. 'Cause these days are reminding me. And even when I'm indoors,
I can afford to come up a slight little bit more.
and even when I'm indoors, I can feel it all the same. 'Cause these days are reminding me that I said you stayed. And the memories we said we wouldn't break, the
I would try and probably add in. I feel like something's missing here. What I'm going to do is just see whether or not it makes a big difference. But I want to add in my own little. Let's do June. I haven't used this a lot, so let's try and figure this out again. I just want to bass that sits underneath this section here.
days.
It goes with the kick a little bit and kind of accompanies it. Let's go initialize patch. cut off to be down. I want 8 voices. Spread it. Yeah, that's all I want. All right.
I reminded me. I remember. I reminded me the nights that you say. Cause these days I reminded me the nights that you say, and the promises we said we wouldn't break, that kept us safe from so alone. Cause all I can remember is the best of us, the love I lost you. All the tears that fall and I miss your touch. I can move it all, oh it hurts too much. Cause we turned to dust, gave up on something true. So tell me how to live without you. So tell me how to live.
Cool. So I think that's probably about it. I just want to add in those little bits of low end down there, so we're not like it just needed that energy. You know what I mean? Let's play the drop now and see if everything's
Gave up on something true. So tell me how to live without you. So tell me how to live without you. So tell me how to live without you.
It's looking pretty good. Let me have a look at these mains real quick. Cool. So we're nearing the end here. And let me just have a look. Good thing to start doing is having a look at the other songs that you have for reference. So crazy thing is just how like pushed, say, some of these Millennium songs. Like that's not running through any of this stuff. That's going just externally, straight out, not being affected by anything, and it's really quite hectic. Like that's a Davin song. The kick and the snare is a lot more snappy and high end. Intense than what we're aiming for in this one. That was something that was a bit of a concern for me initially, but it's sounding fine, to be honest. So, I mean, we could push this more, really. I I could maybe crush this a smidge with a decapitator. If we want this a little bit more like sort of intense, I guess we could. No, that's not what I wanted. Get rid of the side chains. I don't need that there. It's just not doing anything. And then maybe grab the. Where the friggin' hell is it? There it is. What I want to do is add a saturator onto this and kind of push. Okay, this is sounding good. Let's just, I'm gonna add another neutron onto this and just affect the top end with the exciter. Cool, so that's sounding pretty good. Let's go from the top and finish this up once and for all.
Drowning in the deep end, trying to make my way to you. Blacking out the weekend with something that will get me through. Oh, 'cause these days are reminding me that I said you stay, and the promises we said we wouldn't break that kept us safe from feeling so alone. 'Cause all I can remember is the best of us, the love I lost to you. Polaroids and memories of festivals that give me deja vu. Oh, when the summer turns to fall and I miss your touch, I can move it all, it hurts too much 'cause we turned to dust, gave up on something true. So tell me how to live without you. 'Cause these days are reminding me of the nights that you stayed, and the memories we said we wouldn't break, that kept us safe from feeling so alone. 'Cause all I can remember is the best of us, the love I lost to you. Polaroids and memories of festivals that give me deja vu. When the summer turns to fall and I miss your touch, I can move it all, oh it hurts too much, 'cause we turned to dust, gave up on something true. So tell me how to live without you. Tell me how to live without you. So tell me how to live without you. Tell me how to live without. So tell me how to live without.
So yeah, this is a big thing when people are like cutting a lot. Sometimes they'll do it a little bit too much. In this instance, I feel like this has happened and he's cut off a little bit too much of most of these vocals. They kind of, you can see it sort of like stops there at like 300, and that's way too high. Like there's so much information that needs to be had in like the 100 to 200 area as well in the vocals. That's just so crucial. So be really careful when you're cutting and doing all that sort of shit, that you're not cutting out too much.
So tell me how to live without you.
Dope. So that, my friends, is how I would mix a record, for the most part anyway. I hope there was a lot in there that you could take away from. That was a lot of the shit that like I try to explain, but I can't really explain too well without actually going in and doing it. So hopefully this gives you like an idea of what we've kind of been like going through in a lot of these videos over the course of the past year and a bit. And it kind of gives you like a more holistic approach or like perspective on what mixing is all about, and why we make the decisions we make. And like, you know, I don't know. I just think this is going to be cool for you guys to see. I'm excited for you to watch it, and I really hope that you enjoy it and get some shit out of it. So yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.